Welcome to the Armed and Ready podcast. I am your host, Jason Wood, the VA loan guy. We have a really exciting episode lined up for you, so come check it out. Hey, and welcome to another episode of the Armed and Ready podcast. I'm your host, Jason Wood, the VA loan guy. Super excited today because we are in studio with our guest, and really pumped to have Ian Lewis here with us. He's a Navy vet and working in aviation, so we're going to get into his whole story stuff. But Ian, thanks for coming to see us today.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Yeah, this is really cool. So, we're excited. Paco and I are excited because since we've made this room like the studio, we haven't had anybody in person, so we're pumped about it.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're excited, man. So you're in the Navy. Tell us a little bit about your background and why or what was it in you that made you want to join the military?
Well, let's go all the way back to where I grew up, which was in Long Beach, California.
Okay.
And I'm a child of immigrants. My parents came from South America, and Guyana to be exact. So that's the only English-speaking country within the continent there. So it's kind of cool to tell folks. But I fell in love with aviation at the age of 6. And that was my first trip to Canada to go see my grandfather on an Air Canada 767. And I remember that day like it was yesterday. I wanted the window seat, couldn't get it, cried like like a little baby.
Yeah.
And, the flight attendant helped out, and I got the window seat. And from that day on, anything that I touched my hand with, it was paper or wanted a toy, it was an airplane. So it started then. From there, coming up, my mom, she actually went to the Army as a nurse.
Oh.
So she served in the nurse corps for about 8 years or so, got to the rank of major. And, she started telling us like, hey, military is the route to go. I'm not paying for your college, effectively. My parents didn't have that much money.
Yeah.
But she took advantage of the opportunities that she saw and what it could be for her kids. So I have 2 older sisters, 2 of which went to the Army. One retired, sergeant first class. The other one did 8 years. And both of them saw tours in Kosovo and Iraq and got out. Now they're doing their stuff out there in the world. For me, I came along 8 years later. My goal was, again, to be a commercial pilot. So what was that going to look like?
Yeah.
My mom put me in a lot of positions to succeed. A part of that was going to Civil Air Patrol for a handful of years. So I did that from junior high all the way through high school, getting to the rank of cadet commander. Actually soloed at the age of 16. So I've been flying since I was 16 years old.
Wow, okay. That's impressive.
The path was to go to the Air Force Academy. And of course, to go to any military academy, you got to stay good with the academics. Mm-hmm. Now, unfortunately, being a bit of a knucklehead that I was coming into the teenage years, grades were okay, and they got better, but then I wanted to start having fun, so to speak. I felt that I was missing out with, friends running the streets and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I stopped taking some courses, and, as a knucklehead, I got bounced out of one school, went back to the other one, still got my way back to a nomination after I got my grades back up. But unfortunately, to get accepted into the academy, you have to show consistency throughout those years. That's what they're looking at, right? So they offered me the prep academy into the Air Force Academy. But because of young arrogance and selfishness at the time, I felt some kind of way about it. And I forewent that opportunity, and then I went to the Navy.
Dude, our stories are so similar. It's crazy as you're telling me this. So, so like you as a kid, I think Top Gun came out when I was 5 or 6.
Oh yeah,
probably 6, and instantly, same as you as a kid,
hooked.
like everything I touch, any book, if I had to do like a book report or do anything for class, it was on the F-14 Tomcat. I mean, everything was just airplane, right?
That's right, yeah.
And I was trying to go I got nominated to the academies, and same thing. They offered me prep school because I couldn't even get my SAT scores high enough.
Right.
And at the time when it came to like those standardized tests, man, I really struggled with them.
It's tough, yeah.
And I was really good at school and did all the extracurriculars, but the test, man, I had a hard time with it. So I couldn't get in. And then I was like, all right, well, I'll try Embry-Riddle. Got nominated, got accepted to that school, but it costs a fortune.
Right.
My parents were like, we're not paying for it.
Right.
So I'm like, shoot, what am I going to do? And my dad had some college classmates that had all gone through the Air National Guard, and my goal was to be a commercial pilot. That was the dream, right?
Right.
And so he's like, all my buddies in school did that. He's like, let me call a few of them and see if anyone's still there. He's like, they might all be retired, but let me see.
Right.
So he called up a few folks, and one of the guys was still there. He happened to be the 1-star general of the base, right?
How about that?
And so we go down, and he gives us a little tour and stuff, and he's like, this is the shop you need to work in right here, which is airfield management
Okay.
and base ops. And he's like, there's a problem though. I'm like, oh, what's the problem? He's like, there's no openings. I'm like, shoot. All right. Well, what's next? I could do a different job. He's like, call me in a week. Yes, sir. Okay. So we split, call him in a week. He's like, you got to slot and base ops, get your butt to base training. I was like, oh, here we go.
How about that?
Yeah. So, so our stories are similar in that regard.
Right. So it's funny you speak to that with respect to networking, right? Networking is huge.
Yeah.
Because I soloed and I wasn't able to get into the academy, I was feeling some kind of way about that for a while. Having gone to the recruiter's office of the Navy, I was mad at the Air Force by then.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I don't even want to deal with you guys anymore. And of course, there were recruiters walking around high school, and that recruiter saw me and I saw him, and I guess it was a level of vulnerability I had in my eyes. He pounced on that.
Yeah.
Right. The Marines
They're
were there
trained well.
They are. The Marines were there at the same time too. You know how that goes. Everybody's flocking to the Marine because they have that certain stigma to them and that presentation when they walk in there.
Cool uniform.
And those Charlies and those Alphas.
Yeah.
They look good. I won't lie. But I wanted to go a different direction. So the recruiter's like, "What do you got planned?" I was like, "I don't know." Literally, it's like 2 weeks away from graduation. Actually, it was 8 months from graduation. And he was like, "Okay, we'll come down to the office, take the tests, and let's see what you want to do. What do you want to do?" Well, I want to work in aviation. Put me as close to the pilots as I can without flying the airplane. Now, I don't know what that could have meant as far as being a plane captain on a carrier deck or doing all kind of labor type work. That wasn't what I wanted to do. But the test scores were high enough, and air traffic came up. I knew about it since I had sold it at 16 with the Civil Air Patrol, but not
you knew
really.
What air traffic was, yeah.
Yeah, I had an idea, but never really saw it. So from there, went to Long Beach Airport, hung out for a couple months. Went down to Los Alamitos where I was doing my squadron work with Civil Air Patrol and sat with them for a few months. And I said, okay, I can do this. I like this, right? So we're talking to planes and you see the other side of it. I was interested. I was hooked from there. So, maturity had a lot to do with it at the time too. Staying focused, as a young man coming into the world, what your priorities were, how dedicated were you to the process. So as I look back on it now, as a 40-year-old man, I wasn't ready yet. I didn't deserve that opportunity because I hadn't worked for it, right? And now having kids of my own, I can actually say, hey, I've been there, done that. This is what you need to do. Stay on course.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, 2 weeks after graduation, went off to the Navy.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. They had air traffic school at my same school for my job, and just interacting with some of the other Air Force guys that are going through it. That's not an easy school.
No.
That's a tough training school, and that's a tough job.
It is.
I think and correct me if I'm wrong, but usually Time or People or one of those magazines annually puts out the list of the most stressful jobs in America.
Sure.
And air traffic control is usually top 10.
Yeah.
President of the United States. There's some other ones that are up there that
Absolutely.
are really high, but that's not an easy gig.
No, well, like you said, like anything in life, requires training. And the cool thing about air traffic control, as I've learned now, having been in the job for almost 20 years, actually over 20 years, is that there's a lot to it, right? With any career, any profession, you have to learn your fundamentals.
Yeah.
And of course, there's outside the box thinking. There's 3-dimensional thinking, 2-dimensional thinking as it applies to the rules and regs on how we have to move airplanes in the National Airspace System. And as you alluded to earlier with respect to the tech schools with Air Force and what we called A schools in the Navy, that was your initial training. And it was difficult. They set it up in a manner that we had a test on a Monday every week. Now, why do you think they did that? Who's dedicated to the process?
Right.
Right? We had a lot of senior air traffic controllers, E6s and E7s that would tell us, hey, this is no joke. You guys got to get it together or else you guys can expect yourself to be dismissed from the program. And having done research while I was there sitting and talking to folks about how much can be made on the outside and how good of a career it can be, that's something that's okay, I don't want to mess this up.
Totally.
Right? So that was 4 months of pretty intense training there in Pensacola, Florida. Finished that up in February of 2001 and got my first duty station out here in Coronado with the Tactical Air Control Squadron. So that had responsibilities of deploying with Marine units to set up mobile airfields on forward operating bases wherever we went out to. Been to East Timor, Iraq, a lot of Indonesia stuff. So we had some fun.
What was probably the scariest moment you had?
We had to take over a tower down in East Timor. that was overran by some insurgents down that way. And the UN was actually up there, and they had gotten out of there. So we had UN planes flying into that airport. We had to go to that tower, set it up. It was kind of wild. There were bullets flying over our heads. There was forest fires going on in the jungle. It was wild. And at 18, 19, 20 years old, I'm just like, what is going on here? But the mission, you do what you're trained to do.
Yeah.
Don't think about it twice. Go into it. You know, if you got questions, ask, but this is what you've been trained to do. And we went out multiple times with Marine units when we were in Japan, down here at Camp Pendleton, going out to San Clemente. And we learned a lot. So at that point, when you get into the mission, you react. As much like, when you plug into position talking to airplanes. You've been trained for this. You know what you need to do. Take command and handle your business. So
yeah,
it's intense.
It is intense. How long were you in the Navy for?
I did 10 years. So I saw 3 deployments out of here in San Diego with TACRON 12, Tactical Air Control Squadron. When we come back from deployments for us for air traffic controllers, we're not really doing anything when we get back. So we have an opportunity to go temporary assigned duty to other airfields to continue to learn about our job. So I went down to Imperial Beach, which is the busiest heliport that I know of in California for the Navy. I worked there for about 2 or 3 years on and off while I was stationed down here in San Diego, and earned what was known as a Control Tower Operator Certificate. In the air traffic realm, after you get out from the military, that's what affords you to go work private.
Got it. Okay.
You need to get that ticket. CTO will afford you to work in a contract tower, a federal contract tower, I should say.
Okay.
So we have towers that are out here in Southern California that are not FAA, but they're federally contracted out to work. So they're supplemented with people who've already been trained as air traffic controllers in the military.
Got it.
Or from the FAA.
What's it take to get that certificate?
So in the military, you earn it there, or you've been already hired as an employee with the FAA. And if you've retired or you figure the FAA wasn't for you, you can go work one of those federally contracted towers.
Okay.
So, and I'm hearing now that they do have some universities that will train you in air traffic concepts and procedures and end up certifying you as a control tower operator. I don't have the names of those specifically, but they're far and few in between. They try to get those certified because, again, everything that we do is backed by the FAA, right? So if folks get their certifications in the military, you have what's known as a pin card, and your tower chief or your radar branch chief is signing off on those, and you have that. And that CTO comes from Oklahoma City.
Gotcha.
Everything we do goes through and comes back from Oklahoma City as far as our certifications are concerned. So
that's interesting. So you're still doing air traffic control now, and I know we were talking before the show. The facility that you work at, you're kind of like all Southern California, not just one airport, right?
Right.
And so tell us a little bit about kind of the day in the life of in air traffic control. Stressful, is there a lot going on? Manageable? Like what's it like?
Well, you have 2 sides of air traffic. I like to call, actually 3 facets of it. You have the terminal and you have the en route. But I say terminal 1A and terminal 1B, and let's start there. So your terminal 1A particularly leads to your towers. So everybody sees the towers. You go to the airports, you go to Limber, you go to LAX. You may drive past Palomar or Ramona, wherever you live here in San Diego or any place in the country, and you see where the planes are taking off from. That's easy. You got a visual acuity of what air traffic is.
Right.
Once those planes get away from that immediate terminal area, they're in the next threshold of terminal control, which is the radar side. And that's what I do now. And once they leave the immediate airport, and they're, say, for instance, they're trying to go from, let's say, Brownfield there by the border all the way up to Santa Barbara, well, they're getting what's known as flight following. And once they get away from there, they're calling the radar air traffic facility and saying, well, this is who I am, this is my type aircraft, this is how high I want to fly, and this is where I'm going. And from there, we start putting in the flight plan into the computer. Their computers on board respond to us and radar, and then they're on their way. So when that plane starts talking to us, we see them all the way through.
Now, is their flight plan, if they filed it with the tower that they originated from, it doesn't transfer over in any kind of system, so they have to re-announce when they get passed on to you?
So there's a couple of ways to do the flight planning. Obviously, from the pilot side of things, you always should be following a flight plan. That way it's in the system. The NAS knows about who you are. And when I say NAS, the National Airspace System, it'll populate. They can call what's known as a flight service station to open up their flight plan. They don't necessarily have to talk to ATC depending upon what airspace they're in, but once they get to where they're going under a particular set of flying rules, which is known as VFR, visual flight rules, they have to ensure that they close that flight plan. If they get to their destination and they don't close it, then we're putting out alert notices for them. Where are they at? Where were they? And we have to track that and see if we talk to them at some point, or we send out some of those airport operations folks and look for that plane to that hangar, or we may have to send out search and rescue if we don't end up finding them. The other side of that is known as IFR, flight planning, much like what all your airliners do.
Yeah.
All of them operate under IFR. So their flight plans are put in through their command centers. They populate into the towers. They populate into the radar facilities, and we see them from pushback at the gate all the way up into the flight levels, which is usually 18,000 feet and above, and then all the way back down to whatever destination they're going to. So there's a multitude of ways that pilots can traverse the system. A big part of it is educating them on that.
Yeah. Now, how does it, with as much air traffic as in Southern California? I mean, you got LAX and San Diego, Orange County. I mean, there's a lot of planes, plus all the private airports and private planes. I mean, there's a lot happening in the sky.
A lot going on.
And then I think what comes to mind for me is like all the military aviation that's also in this region.
Yes.
How does that interact with, the civilian flying and the military, and like how do you guys kind of manage all that and keep everybody safe?
Well, decades of standard operating procedure. So this is a culmination of what you see flying. It's constantly evolving. So it's just not we set one piece of airspace and that's it. Based upon how air traffic and air travel has progressed and grown over the years, we've started to see situations where we needed to improve. How can we be more efficient? Our whole purpose as air traffic control is to prevent an operation or prevent a collision of aircraft operating within the system. Right. So if there's certain pieces of airspace or procedures that we're doing in-house that could be problematic to air safety, then we have to take a look at that and revisit it and rebuild. Right. So we're always constantly moving airspace around or talking about and improving procedures to make sure that we're giving the best service possible to the user. That's a big part of what we do. So with the military folks, again, we have civilian controllers that are there at the military facilities. They usually work for DOD. You have the military controllers there as well who are coordinating with us on the FAA side, but a controller's a controller.
Yeah.
Right. So we don't care what your platform is. What is it that we need to do to ensure that we take care of business?
So you guys see them and
yes,
you're
absolutely
talking to them like you talk to the others.
The towers have radar displays. Some are certified, some aren't, with respect to what they can do and what services they can provide. And of course, us on the radar side, we have a big picture of really what's going on. So if we were actually talking to that aircraft, we'll see the call sign for that plane, and we'll see their type aircraft and their ground speed and their altitude, and the tower can see the same. But then we see all the other data blocks that we aren't talking to, but we know that they're there because their transponder's operative and they're flying around in airspace where they don't particularly have to talk to us, but we're still charged to separate, from those aircraft as well.
Yeah. In case a little civilian airplane ventures into a spot they're not supposed to be.
It happens all day, every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. So growing up in Nevada, there's some, protected flight space as you head down towards Las Vegas, right? And so, you hear a lot of people's stories flying the little Cessna or whatever, and they venture into like military controlled space, and they get some heat. That's for sure.
Absolutely. And we always say every flight starts on the ground, right? So you being from Nevada or someone coming in from Nebraska or an area where it's not that densely populated,
right?
There's a bit of intimidation as far as coming into big airspace. But if you do proper flight planning and look at the charts and see what routes you can take and then ask, you can still ask if you're unsure. We always tell pilots, ask. I'd rather have you ask right now instead of doing something that could put yourself in harm's way or the aircraft that you're converging with that didn't expect you to be in that position in harm's way. And we're all taking care of each other. So it's one hand washes the other in this industry. And I love getting out and talking to pilots across the spectrum saying, hey, what is it that we can do better, right?
Yeah.
A lot of pilots will be intimidated, like, well, the controls are going to yell at me. Well, no, our job is public service. That is our duty, and that's what we're supposed to do. But in turn, the pilots have their responsibilities as well. So we try to emphasize saying, hey, if you do this, things will probably work out better for you, right? So again, it's just a big relationship that we're all trying to help each other out with.
That's really cool. I watched a cool aviation video, a little bit older, but when the SR-71 was still flying. And the pilots, I think they were coming back, I don't know if it was from an air show or what it was, but anyways, I think they were near Atlanta's airport, and they were coming in. I think they needed to stop and get fuel or whatever, right? And the co-pilot was like, "Hey, you want to you want to do a flyby of the tower, because they're in such a cool airplane. Everyone's excited about that airplane.
Yeah.
So they call in the tower and they talk to a young gal who was like brand new, like her second day on the job, right? And so they get to do this flyby, with the SR-71, and they ended up getting to meet the pilots and everything.
That's cool.
And fast forward, I think it was like 13 or 15 years later, the SR-71 pilot was now flying commercial airplane, and that gal had moved on in the FAA somehow when she was boarded that airplane, and she recognized the pilot's voice when he came on.
That's cool.
From when she was in air traffic control. So she, asked if she could go talk to him and stuff, and they started connecting, and she was like, yeah, I was there that day when you did the flyby at the SR-71.
That's cool.
Just a cool story.
Yeah. You find a lot of stories like that in aviation. I can't tell you how many presentations that myself and other coworkers have done across the nation and even here locally. And the pilots, they cue in on voices. Right. Hey, is this so-and-so? Is this so-and-so? And they'll do that while we're working. Sometimes it's busy. Like, hey, just tell, so-and-so I said hello. Okay, well, that's what's up. And it makes us feel good, and that's why we tell our folks at work, like, get out, get involved. Some rather not, because the job, like I said, again, it's stressful.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, they want to unplug and go home and decompress and do what they need to do. But I consider myself an av nerd to the fullest. if I can get out there and meet folks and engage, that's what I love doing. And again, like I said, it goes into the next level of, okay, this life. What is it about? Networking, having fun, putting yourself in position for opportunities, paying it forward, right? I go in a lot of different directions of where it can go. Right. But I love people. I love spreading the knowledge that I have. I like paying it forward because that's what was done for me. Right. And if we get into that perpetual cycle of just giving knowledge and doing well for one another, we're unstoppable.
Totally.
Yeah. I know it's totally cliche on that, but
no, but I agree with you 100%, man.
Yeah.
You got to be doing that. Now you fly also, right?
I do.
Tell us about what you're flying. I mean, you started flying when you're young.
Yeah.
But you obviously stuck with it. I did not.
Yeah.
So I just go up for joyrides with friends now. But tell me about what you're doing.
Well, so again, like I said, sold at 16. Actually finished up my license at about 25, 26. Again, I had a come to Jesus moment, if you will. By this point, I was stationed at Point Magoo, which is out there in Ventura, California, Oxnard-ish, if you will, borderlining. And, I was really at a crossroads of what I wanted to do with my life. And I said, well, what do you want to do? Let's finish out this career, because I've been told by, the folks that were above me, go get your radar ticket, go get another CTO, build your resume in case you want to go do this full time. And that's why I did the 10 years. So I had another 5 years added on after San Diego to go to Ventura. So a lot happened there. Met my wife, had my first child. Well, she had the kid, but we all got together and family started. So that was awesome.
We were pregnant together.
We were pregnant together, right? She did the work though. That's for sure. But a lot of good things came out of that duty station. But it was one of those things where now becoming into my own as a man, you have to start making decisions on what it is that you wanted to do.
Sure.
And a buddy of mine at the time was like, well, before you get married and have kids, go get your ratings. Go get all your ratings. Because it was, when you are a professional in any realm, and that goes for ladies or guys, is that, you want to take care of your business, before you get into a relationship, because things happen. All right. We have to start reprioritizing. Yeah. But a big time is flying. A lot
of your time is not only yours anymore, right?
No, not at all. Not at all. But I was able to finish my pilot's license, my PPL, before, I got involved in a relationship and all that good stuff. And after that, it wasn't until I came back down to San Diego, and now we have 2 kids. I was like, okay, I think I really want to do this. So April 2010 was when I separated from the Navy.
Okay.
Got down to San Diego and started working towards my commercial pilot license. So within the realm of accumulating your pilot ratings, you have the PPL. And typically after that, you have what's known as your instrument rating. That'll afford you to fly into the clouds. And typically after that, you go get your commercial rating, which is what I did. Had to have 250 hours, accumulated all this stuff, and then you have to take another check ride. From there, you get your multi-engine add-on to that. So now you can start getting paid for flying as a commercial pilot. And there's some jobs that start opening up, aerial survey, flying tours like I do on the side. And you're working your way up at that point. Do you want to be an instructor? And I'll stop there for a minute and talk about flight instruction. Is that I've been through a lot of them over the years. Yeah. And the best ones that I learned from are the ones that actually wanted to do it. So aside from being an instructor as a pilot or an instructor anywhere in any industry, you have to want to do it. But
Have a
some
passion for
right.
the teaching element of it.
Right, but some
Yeah.
people are driven by, with the end goal of what they're going to get as far as, hours accumulated on the pilot side getting towards their ATP, which is airline transport pilot. It does look good on the resume, but everyone's not meant to be an instructor.
Sure.
I will tell you that right now. Anybody can regurgitate information from a book. At 250 hours, roughly 300 hours, I could become a CFI. But what experience do I have, really? I've just been flying a plane, and I know some stuff that got me to this level, but I like flying with the folks who've been around for a while, who've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 10,000 hours. Those who flew in the airlines, that can really come back and say, hey,
tens of thousands
and experience, and they've been through some stuff. Some of the the oh crap moments when they've been flying by themselves because maybe they were flying haphazardly or they weren't really paying attention to what they were doing and learned from that. So I thought about doing instruction. If I ever did it would be for my kids. Pass that along to them if that's what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
But after that, we'll see what happens. But CFI isn't particularly for me per se. But I just want to build my hours, continue to fly, and then eventually get myself to the airlines. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Having had that same desire to fly commercial and stuff, and for what it's worth for anyone watching or listening to the podcast, there's a lot of paths to becoming a pilot.
Whole bunch.
There's a lot of ways to get there. The military is probably the least costly way from a financial standpoint because the military, if you get into flight school, will pay you to fly, right? And then you build up your hours, and that's where a lot of the airline pilots come from because you can stack up the hours, and the application process for these commercial airline jobs require quite a bit of flying experience.
They do.
And so it's like, how do you get there, right? And you can get there on your own, but you're paying out of pocket for fuel, plane rental, all the instruction, like all that stuff. So it's not inexpensive, that's for sure.
Right.
There's some cool schools. I had a buddy who I served with in the Air Force, and his dad was a commercial airline pilot for Northwest Airlines at the time.
Oh, Northwest.
Yeah. Flying international, and
Yeah.
he got all the benefits as being a kid, and he got to fly for free all over the place and stuff. But he got his pilot's license, and he ended up flying in the Air Force too. And I remember as he was gearing up to go in front of the pilot selection board and stuff, the summer beforehand, he found this school. It was in Sacramento at the time. I don't know if it exists anymore, but it was like you had to have so many hours, private, VFR. I don't remember if you needed your IFR or not, but I think it took you from IFR to commercial multi-engine in like a 3-month span.
Okay.
And it was kind of like a college setting in a sense.
Yes.
Like you went there, you're in a dorm, you're studying in your off hours, you're flying, studying, and it's condensed, obviously. That wasn't cheap, but I thought that's a pretty cool way too. I mean, if you're looking to really get there.
Yeah, there are a multitude of ways to do it. So like you said, as you alluded to, military, obviously, but that's highly selective.
Yep.
And highly political, right? And then based upon what's going on with the budget per se, actually, once you've crossed over and gotten those wings and whatever branch you're flying for, it's all based on money. Do they have money to fly this year? And of course, they're going to have money to fly because that's what they do. But very political process to get through there in the military, but it can be done, right? Totally. Then you have some of the 141 schools you were talking about, right? You go to a college who's certified, and they'll take you from 0 hours, and you actually get your time. You get your ratings in less time because you're accredited. So I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you get your commercial rating in about 190 hours at a 141 program versus the 250 flying Part 61. And Part 61 is just paying as you go, right? You go to a flight school, and provided you have the money to get yourself through, then that's what you do, right? There are a lot of ways to get there, but you just have to choose which one's best for you. And, back in the day, they wanted degrees. A lot of these jobs say degrees. Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you, I'm not a college graduate, okay? Did some college courses. School really wasn't my thing. But a big part of life is on-the-job experience, on-the-job training. And we've kind of gotten away from that in a lot of ways, and we've seen that in our schools now. There's no longer metal shops, wood shops, right?
I know.
All these critical jobs that I'm a homeowner now and been so for a handful of years, but, you want credible work, folks to come out and do some work on your home. We can't find them. People have been driven away from those occupations. Everybody's going towards tech, and there's nothing wrong with that. But eventually, if you live in a house, it's going to break down. You need somebody to help you fix it up.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So all these jobs that I'm talking about, apprenticeships, air traffic control, flying a plane for a major is effectively on-the-job training. Right? They may say you may need a degree, but you don't. Right? So for the air traffic control side we talked about before, you can go military, or you can be wait and go in as what we call an off the street hire. But those are few and far in between. Doing a general announcement for the FAA to get yourself hired, and it's an arduous process, right? A lot of bureaucracy involved. The
A lot of
federal
those
level,
federal jobs are tough to get.
they are.
Yeah.
And you just have to wait your turn in that sense. But the military, or actually flying a plane, you can have more control in that realm because it's accumulating the ratings and accumulating the hours.
Mhm.
And if you go and get 3,500 hours and you eventually got your commercial multi-engine, but you've been flying what's known as King Airs, which is a turboprop for the last 5 years, and half of that is your total time, guess what? You're either going to have a Part 135 operation looking at you, which is usually private charter, or the 121 field, which is the airlines, and they say, hey, we like what you have. Come on board. And typically for the airlines, you start at a regional, let's say SkyWest. I'm sure people out heard of SkyWest.
Yeah, totally.
Build your hours there, and eventually you start applying to the majors. Delta, American, Southwest, United, JetBlue, now Spirit and Frontier, they're making a merge. And, you work your way up to that. Or you want to go fly boxes all day for UPS, FedEx.
That's not a bad gig.
It's not a bad gig. And I have a handful of friends that are in the industry. It's taking care of them well. But like anything, it's a culmination. You have to work towards that process.
Yeah.
And that's what we talked about earlier, is working towards the process, respecting the process. What's your desires? You can get there, but you have to work for them.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, you got to have a plan. And I think, we were kind of chatting about this, beforehand, is for those that are in the military and they're like, hey, I'm getting out,
right.
like you got to have a plan. You're getting out, or why are you getting in? What is the plan?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And you may not have one when you first start, but you definitely need to put one together in time, right? Because eventually, life is going to throw you a change, and you got to have a plan. You got to be ready to make that shift and adapt and all the rest of it, right?
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, air traffic is what I found out about prior to going in, so I knew what I wanted to do. A lot of folks go in the military for a lot of different reasons. They're from Podunk, wherever, and they just want to get out of town.
Sure.
Okay, they want to go see something different. Not necessarily having a plan when they go in, and they get a job that they're not crazy about, and it's like now they're kind of, ticked off, like, well, why did I do this? Well, you just wanted to leave, but you never had a plan. What's your plan? I know it's hard at 17, 18, maybe even 19, 20 years old to figure out what it is that you want to do. But like you said, life throws curveballs, and some people don't necessarily have that advice coming into it saying, hey, you should try and go do this, because when you get out of the military, this can set you up with a good life. You will have some good leadership that will tell you to go to school, because they have a whole bunch of accredited schools, as you know, that will give you degrees in the field that you're working in, but you may not be particularly crazy about that. Or you just want to go get your general ed out the way. I started going down that route, but again, college really wasn't for me. And by this point, year 3, 4, and 5, I've been told that, what this job can really do for me on the outside. So I was really intrigued by that.
Yeah.
And when you start seeing the income opportunities that don't necessarily require a college degree, well, then I don't particularly want to have to waste my time in areas that I'm not going to deal with, But there's other things you got to think about. Like, so in the aviation industry, for an air traffic controller or a pilot, you have to maintain what's known as a medical, right? Our eyes have to stay good. Our heart has to stay good. Yeah. Our health has to be in tip-top shape. Otherwise, we lose our medical. Therefore, we cannot perform our duties, right? So I did think about that at one point. And I did go to Embry-Riddle, because that was a part of the Navy and a lot of the branches, and airport management came up. And I said, if I ever couldn't do the things I love to do as far as flying and air traffic control, airport management would definitely be something that I would be intrigued in.
Yeah.
So I did go to school for about 2 years with that. Of course, I didn't finish, but nonetheless, I have the experience. And again, through networking and whatnot, you get yourself in an airport, start talking to people, you show them your resume, what you've done within the industry, things can happen.
Well, the aviation community is a tight community too.
Very much so.
It's a great community. People really take care of each other, and it's welcoming and warm and stuff like that. So it's a great community to be involved with if that's something you have an interest or a passion in, for sure. And to your comment, the networking and just getting to know people and stuff, it's readily available.
Yes.
Especially in that aviation community.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. I mean, I like taking my son and just walking over the airport on the weekends, and really they're excited to see him. They don't care about me.
Right.
He runs to the plane, and next thing you know, they're talking to him for an hour and a half, letting him touch the buttons, walk around. I mean, that's when we're talking about planting seeds. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to happen at 3 or 4. It can happen at 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. It's a matter of exposure for a lot of people. You don't know until you go into that realm. And you don't know unless people passionate like us talk to them about that, right? If you have the knowledge, I said I like spreading it out. People, oh, I never knew about that. I never knew about air traffic control. I didn't know about I could do it this way. Okay. But a big part of that too is taking the onus and actually find out that information for yourself. Again, how driven are you?
Yeah.
You know, and just not aviation, but anything in life. So, you know, we were talking about the military and going in and having a plan, and now even separating. Right? What's the plan once you get out of the military? Right. So for me personally, I could say that, okay, I knew that I wanted to go into the FAA.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So what was I doing a year out? I was going to any air traffic facility that I knew that I was interested in working at, and took a tour, took donuts, sat down there for an hour, plugged in and listened with the headset that I was given from the military, and just track along and follow. Right. A big part of this job for us as air traffic controllers is seeing the initiative and the intensity in a trainee's eyes when they come into the building. Right? How engaged are they? How much of a self-starter are they? Do they study on their own time, or do they wait to come to work and study and then have the instructor drag them through the process? Right?
Right.
What we do is specialized, highly specialized. And there's a lot of information that we have to retain, then regurgitate, and then retain in order to do our jobs effectively. Right. So from the airport standpoint of it, you know, controllers have to learn the taxiways, every last one of them, the runway lengths, you know, where can they do takeoffs from, and where is everything at on the airfield, moving those airplanes through the sky, and then eventually on the radar side, you know, it's three-dimensional. We're not only separating airplanes from airplanes on the radar side and the scopes, but vertically and laterally. So we have three-dimensional pieces and pockets of airspace that's going on, and you have to put the airplanes in certain positions to make sure that it works for the next sector that you're handing them off to, from the ground all the way up through the flight levels.
Yep.
So it's intense.
Yeah. Yeah. It's intense. It's really fascinating. You know, if you ever sit, I don't know if anyone ever goes to like Disneyland or something, and you sit outside at night, if you can watch the airplanes flying into LAX and stuff.
Oh yeah.
You know, and that's all I mean, and they're coming in just boom, one right after the other, right? Because it's a busy airport. But that's all controlled. That's you guys, you know, putting them in position, and
Yeah.
okay, you're following this guy, you're on runway whatever right, and you're on runway left.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
It's funny you brought that up. So there's an in and out there at LAX. And maybe for folks who are on Facebook or Instagram that are av nerds, they'll always see folks with their in and out burger and watching a jet fly over top of them and landing. That's a south complex, what we call, or the north complex, excuse me. That's 2-4 right and 2-4 left. Well, years ago, that's how it was. Was on my 12th birthday. My dad, he took me out. I don't think in and out was there at the time. Maybe it was. Don't really quite remember. We sat there though for hours on end. We had what's known as the 105 freeway that was built from the north end of Downey all the way out to Los Angeles. So growing up there on the north side of Long Beach and Paramount area, we'd always use that to get to the airport now, because before then it was the 405, and that was a nightmare. But my dad would always drive, and he'd be counting the planes. He'd be like, boy, look, 1, 2, 3, 4. He'd count 17 airplanes, right? But the part of that story, what I love about it is that I remember that, and now I'm doing it, right? Not particularly
That's
working
cool.
at LAX, but it's just like, it makes me think of him all the time.
I bet. Yeah. Yeah. It's super cool. I grew up in Reno, Nevada, and my dad would take me as a kid because, you know, I was so into airplanes.
Mm-hmm.
And we just go, you could kind of park, like, I mean, of course it was fenced off, but you can kind of go park it, you know, near the end of the runway or off to the side a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I just sit there. I mean, I could do it all day.
Yeah.
And just watch airplanes take off, watch airplanes land. And then I remember, like, when I got turned 16 and I had my own car, and if I had time on my hands, idle time, I'd go down to the airport and I just watch airplanes.
That's it.
Now they grew the fences and you can't even do that. But
yeah.
Yeah, it was cool. I remember doing that all the time.
I still do it. People think I'm crazy, but I take my kids down there, especially my younger two. They love it. They absolutely love it. So we'll, you know, get them some lunch, a Happy Meal or something, and we'll go check it out. And my boy, he's all about it. Well, at least for now, he's 4 and he wants to do everything dad does.
Of course,
right?
Yeah.
But, you know,
zero.
I want to grasp onto that and keep them in that realm, right? Because we know eventually this industry is declining with pilots. They're going to need pilots here in the next 10, 15, 20 years.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I'm trying to get my
They're all hitting
daughters.
retirement. Yeah.
Trying to get my daughters to go that path. I'm heavily biased to aviation if you haven't figured that out already. But I know the life that it can build. You know, the job security that is afforded. And, you know, if they apply themselves, they can do anything they want to do, right? Yeah. But I know this industry pretty well. And I would tell anybody, if you're interested in aviation, if you want to do something with it, look into air traffic control. You know, go take a discovery flight and see if flying is something for you. A lot of people don't like flying, unfortunately. That's
true. Yeah.
You know, and they see, as of recently, you know, unfortunately, plane accidents happening, right? Planes falling out of the sky. To defend that a bit, you know, like I told, as I said before, every flight starts on the ground, right? So it's a matter of currency and proficiency. Pilots always have to maintain currency, right? But how proficient are you? So if I only have to fly, every 90 days and do takeoffs and landings during day and night, then I go with the family on the weekend. Am I really that proficient? No, probably not.
Yeah.
So you have to learn those personal minimums as we talk about in the industry. Don't force it. Don't do anything silly. If you're not feeling comfortable, go put the plane back and, let's take a break from it and go get the necessary training you need to be comfortable. As I said, take it on my family. I don't mess around with that.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting if you look at, over history, there's been, plane crashes, and a lot of them have been notable people or just notable events.
Sure.
Oftentimes it's weather.
Yeah.
They took two, you can find out what the weather is going to be, and they took more risk than they should have.
Yes.
And a lot of times it's weather, and Mother Nature will beat you sometimes. And and it's unfortunate, but that's a lot of it, and like you said, it all starts on the ground, right?
Absolutely.
So they could have waited a day, avoided it, gone the day before, whatever, and avoided having to fly in that weather. And a lot of it's, the small aircraft, your Cessnas and stuff like that get pinched in ththose bad situations.
Primarily.
It's weather,
Yeah, well, if
the big airplanes, they blast right through it.
Typically, and if anybody's been paying attention to the news over the last handful of years, we know what's happened, in the aviation industry, and, people that we've lost, celebrities, and a whole bunch of stuff. And, because I keep it pretty vague and working with the FAA, I don't go too much into detail because those could be ongoing investigations.
Totally.
So, I kind of leave that alone in a sense. But anybody who follows the stories and knows, like you said, weather is typically the number one killer of pilots. There's maintenance stuff that's involved as well. But again, we should at least, those people who are flying those airplanes have detailed logs about what's going on with that aircraft, right? Who's ever had their hands on it? The mechanics have to sign off on the work. Those folks will get interviewed if something happens. So it's a whole process. But, a lot of these things that we're seeing more times than not are, unfortunately, pilot error.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of times. Interesting you mentioned maintenance. It makes me think of Southwest. I don't know if you've ever read the book kind of about, I think it's called Going Nuts or something like that. Really interesting about how what the thought process was in building that airline,
right?
And the strategy and stuff like that. And, they started as a regional in the Texas area. And,
right.
Then when they wanted to go intrastate, there was a bunch of battles with the big guys and court cases and all this stuff. What's fascinating to me about their business model is they only fly one airplane.
Correct. The 737.
And the beautiful part of that for them is maintenance.
That's right.
At every place they land, there's parts for 737. And there's a mechanic who's really, really good at working on 737s.
That's right.
Everywhere across the country. So, a lot of the potential for mechanical issues and stuff is really, really minimized because you're just creating like a high level of proficiency on one aircraft.
That's it.
All the time. And I think, when I look at other airlines, of course, they got all sorts of different models of airplanes and stuff. I'm like, man, that's smart.
Yeah.
A lot of thinking went into that.
So the ones who copied their models would be JetBlue, Spirit, Frontier, right? They fly, actually, they fly all Airbuses. I think, Frontier has all Airbuses as well as Spirit and JetBlue. They fly one platform. And it's funny you mentioned the mechanics. We go back to that. We even bring that up. There's so many jobs in the aviation industry that need to be filled.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So for those folks who like working with their hands, that's a good paying career.
Totally.
And they need them.
They need them a lot.
They need.
And you're working on airplanes. It's not working on like, that beat up truck on the side of someone's house. Like the airplanes, like the pay's good and it's an important big job, right?
Very much so. There will be no shortage of that. If it flies, it's going to need to be maintained.
Yep.
So I just want to throw that out there. It's like there's plenty of opportunity within the industry. So people just go out there and go look for it. It's there.
Yeah, 100%. Now you also kind of do some other stuff. So you do a little bit of real estate too, right?
I do. Well, I got into that about a year and a half ago, living down in Chula Vista at the time and talking to my neighbors, again, just talking in generalizations. He's like, well, what else are you doing with yourself? I was like, I don't know. He's like, have you considered being a realtor before? He's like, you good with people? I was like, no, not really, but what's it about? I mean, I bought a handful of homes, right? And I've seen what they do. And I was like, well, maybe I could do it, but I never really gave it thought.
Right.
Until he sat me down and said, bro, it's easy. Okay. Well, obviously, there's still a level of knowledge you have to have going into this because you're dealing with people's lives and their money and, their futures.
And their house.
And their house, and that's huge.
Yeah.
Right? So, long story short, I got into the training, got my license, and I got myself into the industry. And I can say that I love it. There's work to be done, absolutely. Driving around town and showing homes. But, a big part of that, aside from the training you receive as a realtor, is the experiences you've had as a consumer already, and taking that in to account when you're dealing with clients,
Mm-hmm.
right? And a big part, again, like I said, networking relationships, you start working with people for a handful of months, they almost become family with respect to,
Oh yeah, you
getting
spend
this
so
home.
much time together.
And you're seeing the kids when you go to the showings and whatnot, if they come or not sometimes. And my line to my clients is, especially on the buying side, at the end of the night, when you're sitting there enjoying a glass of wine, whatever that is that you're doing, you can look around the house, look at your significant other and say, we did good, right? We're happy with this. And the person that was along the ride with us took care of us, didn't try to push us into something that we just needed to get. Again, money is a byproduct of work. Compensation, that is what it is. But for me, it's reputation, it's relationships. It's how do you feel about this? If you don't feel good about it, we move on to the next one. We don't have to get this house, right? But in this crazy market now, getting into that is that we have to kind of temper some of the buyer's expectations.
Right.
If you're on the selling side, you have to temper some of the seller's expectations with respect to the offers that may come in
Mm-hmm.
or may not come in. But right now, it's a hot seller's market.
Yeah.
And it's intense.
It is intense. It's intense. A lot's going on in the market, and I think 2022 is going to be another year of intense sellers market.
Yes.
And it's going to be an interesting ride this year, and it has been the last couple of years in this market. It's been very, very different than what we experienced, the years prior to that, where it was a little more even keeled between buyers and sellers. It wasn't quite this heavily weighted on one side.
Right.
But yeah, now it's a seller's market. They're the king of the hill in the negotiations. So
absolutely.
They have a lot of the leverage and a lot of the chips in their favor. So yeah, but it takes like you were mentioning, that professional that isn't going to try and push the client. And when I talk to my clients too, it can be, for the buyer, it can be a little frustrating, right? Because you see a house, you really like it, but you're one of like 30 offers, right? Are you the best one? Well, we don't know till the end, right? Where you or not.
Right.
And, but I try and just create a little bit of hope in the sense that the right house for you guys, it'll happen.
It will.
The one that's meant for you.
Right.
Right. And sometimes we get into this kind of, I don't know, this emotional kind of frenzy about, well, I have to buy and I have to buy this one and I got to get it now. And I get that because I've been in that seat personally too.
Sure.
But having that little bit of patience or that little bit of help from the professionals helping you, that little bit of extra wisdom to help you kind of navigate that is so important.
Yeah.
And taking care of those clients in that manner, I think just, reaps goodness all through all channels,
All right, well, let's talk about that frenzy and preparation and emotion and anxiety that we talk about is being prepared as a buyer, right? A lot of education going in on the financial side of it, right? So us as realtors, we typically work fairly closely to lenders as well, right? And we have somebody that we like and we trust and we send them their way. But before we even do that, to the consumers, I would say, what are your finances, right? There's certain things that I tell my buyers specifically, like put yourself in a prime position to be able to compete, right? So before we even go looking at lenders and trying to run your credit, what do you have going on right now? How much debt do you have? What is your credit score? You can find all that stuff out on your own, right? There's no use in trying to go and do all this when you know you have a substantial amount of debt because that impacts your buying power.
Yeah.
Right? So take care of all that stuff first. Pay down your debt. Be as strong financially as you can going into that process, right? So that's the first thing that I tell them. Do that first. Then from there, when we start looking at houses, we know that you can afford it, right? Because we're starting to see in the industry now, right? So selling agents start wasting their time. They'll typically want that pre-approval before you go see the house.
Oh, yeah.
Right? They're like, look, we don't want you up in here if you know you can't afford it, right? So people need to, again, temper their emotions, get into reality real quick and go over your finances. What can you really afford? And if you feel the pressure to get into it, well, then start taking care of your business. I throw that on to the buyers. And again, it's all love because I said I was there. Right?
Totally, yeah.
I was in my 20s and, I had some debt and the credit cards as we always hear about. And man, and when you go run the credit, it's kind of disappointing or embarrassing to an extent, right? Saying, well, geez, your credit score is only maybe 580, 620 and this, that, and the other. And we got to get that up, because what else does that impact? Your interest rate,
Mhm.
and how much you're going to pay. How qualified of a buyer are you? So you can save yourself some money as well if you prepare early enough to do the striking. And once you're out in the market, especially this market right now, we're seeing that the homes are going for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, $100,000, above asking.
Yeah.
It's insane.
It's insane. And, the other thing to your comment about credit, as especially in Southern California, home prices are expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And as you get to or cross over that kind of $1 million threshold,
Mm-hmm.
The risk to the lender becomes much greater, right?
Absolutely.
So now they're looking at like, okay, does your credit, does it meet the minimum for that, or does it exceed the minimum, right? Because when you get to the point where it exceeds the bottom,
right,
now your loan moves a little easier,
Absolutely.
moves a little more fluid. Underwriter has a little less worry about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if it's, if you're just 2 points over the bare minimum for that specific thing,
right,
by technicality, yeah, you qualify. But man, are you really going to make it to the finish line all the way?
right,
And that can be a big question mark sometimes. So, to your credit, advising people, like, have your financial platform put together, have it organized, know where you're at with stuff.
Absolutely.
It's easy to get caught up in the hype and the excitement of buying a house.
Correct.
And oh, my landlord's selling the house and I got to move out and I got a 30-day note. It's like, you got to have your ducks in a row. You can't just jump in and have, no money in the bank, tons of debt, credit's not doing that good. Like, all of that is a contributing factor to what you're going to be able to achieve.
Absolutely.
In the home buying side. And a lot of that plays into the process.
Yes.
And how easy or uneasy that process is going to be. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And it takes time to prep. I mean, we're talking about maybe anywhere from 6 months, if you're earning that much, to where you can clear up a lot of debt, to where it may take 3 to 5 years.
Good.
To do that stuff. And, I tell folks, as we've heard before, we've heard the saying, cash is king.
Yeah.
Right. However, what does this country run off of? Credit. This country runs off credit. So credit is king.
Yep.
And I try to put it in those terms where it's like, people are like, well, what do you mean credit? Your credit worthiness is everything. Right. From the time I started out in San Diego at 18 years old, they weren't running credit checks for apartments. Now they are.
Right.
Right. How worthy of a renter are you going to be?
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Right. So folks, if you're out there, take care of your credit as much as you can. This is coming from someone at one point who didn't. And I've learned that way I can emphasize that point that much more, because I've been there and I've done that. We always say, like, just listen along the path. My parents told me, take care of your business. Don't run your credit up, pay your stuff off, keep it low. Right. But, we're young and we're not fully mature yet. And we're just living life until, now it's catching up.
Yeah.
You're married and you have kids and you're trying to get a home, and maybe your spouse isn't earning as much, or their credit's actually pretty good. That's why they always bring up stuff in relationships, right? These conversations you're supposed to have prior to going in, like, how strong. And granted, I mean, should it matter? That's a hard thing to say. I'm not one way or the other, but we know it will be impactful, right?
It will have an impact for sure. Yeah.
When you're trying to make a move and your partner can't make the moves you're making because of the fact of, or both of you can't, because of financial issues with respect to your credit worthiness, it becomes a stressor, right? So the best thing you can do as a young adult, or even as middle age, or whatever it is clear your debt off, and if you have problem with credit cards, don't use them, make it cash, but still maintain a credit card or something that you can show that, you're working towards something. So it's huge on the buying side. It's easy to sell a house, especially in this market. You put it out there, and to an extent, we're seeing some of the arrogance on the seller side. Like, people are selling their house as is, and they're getting top dollar.
Oh yeah.
Right.
And then you request repairs and they're like, nope.
Nah, I don't want to do it. But to an extent with that is just like, we're going through the process now. I have 2 clients, right? One is up there north of $1 million, and I have another one that's, in the realm of, 600 to 700,000, and even that realm is still the Shark Tank. Everyone's been sitting for the last year and a half, 2 years with COVID, not taking vacations, letting that money stack. And now they're coming in saying, boom, you know what? Let's take advantage of these interest rates and let's go get ourselves a home.
Mm-hmm.
I know that because that's what my wife and I did.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And it's just a little bit tougher these days. And so you got to have your financial house in order. You got to pick the right people to work with too, because, as you spoke about earlier, relationships, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not only the relationship with like you and client or me and client, it's the relationships that we have inter-industry as well. right? And I've seen, over the years, I've seen many offers get accepted because of the relationship between the professionals, not necessarily because the numbers on the paper.
Right.
And while the numbers on the paper are important,
Yes.
it's that relationship, and it may not be a long over time it might just be like, how was the interaction?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
Because, at the end of the day, when buyer and seller come together, we're working with each other for a good 30 days or more, right?
Right.
And so, that's kind of part of the decision making a little bit too, is like,
Right.
who's on the other side that we have to work with, and can we work with them, right? Are we going to get along, or is
That's
this going to be banging my head against the wall for 30 days, right?
Well,
It's a big part of it.
In the industry, like I said, I always tell the selling agents that I work with, if I appreciate how the professionalism that they've given throughout the process, right? Because we're working for people who are trying to do stuff with their lives. It's just not about us. Again, we have to take it to that next level of like, look, we're working towards a common goal here. Let's help each other out, right? Let's make it seem that no one's getting raked over the coals, that everyone has an opportunity here to win. And of course, like you said earlier, the emotion, it's hard to take the emotion out of it for folks on the buying side or the selling side. Seller wants top dollar. Buyer doesn't want to seem as if they're getting raked over the coals, especially, even though as is wasn't written on the offer, right, on the listing, but now this house needs almost $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 worth of repair, and the seller's not willing to do it. Yeah. Right. So it can be complex at times, but us as realtors, as I've started to learn over the last year, we wear a lot of hats. Right.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
We have to know a little bit of finance. We have to know a little bit of psychology to help folks out. We have to stay even keeled ourselves in order to present, the best opportunity available for our clients.
Got to know a little home repair.
All that.
Yeah.
Well, we've been around. So, I mean, I'm not particularly a handyman myself, but I can look at something and through experience say, hey, we're going to have to take a look at this, X, Y, and Z. And, we may have to put this on there. Or for the buyers, what is it that they're willing to concede as far as, well, we can take care of that. We just don't want to deal with all the major stuff. And if it's that major, do we stay or do we walk?
Right.
So there was all those options. With the FHA, the VA back loans, those are more stringent with respect to, how they want the home to look, especially after inspection and appraisal. And of course the conventionals, it's carte blanche, whatever goes. If you want to waive the appraisal and loan and inspection contingencies, go for it. We're buying it. We don't care. We'll do what we want with it.
Exactly.
And we've seen that so far in this market.
Yeah, it happens. But there's still a lot of, we're helping a lot of veterans in military get their offers accepted. So,
yes,
not to spook anybody who is using the FHA or VA loan. I mean, they're buying houses.
Yes, they are.
And, what's awesome about our market is there's such a heavy military influence here. There are a lot of home sellers who would prefer that buyer be military.
Absolutely.
Right? Because they're patriots, or maybe they themselves served.
Yes.
And they might have lots of options of offers that just hit their table on selling their house. But I've seen a handful of times where the seller was like, that one might be a higher offer, more money in my pocket, but I like this military family over here.
How about that?
I want them to own my home. Right.
Right.
Let's make that one. Let's piece that one together. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, there's a lot of that kind of patriotism that comes into this, which isn't necessarily contractual, right? It's not part of the paperwork. It's, it's part of that emotional quotient.
Right.
And, that's helpful.
It is.
In our market, that's really helpful, right? We're in a big military market. So that's a big deal. So I see that a lot on top of all the other, tricks and tactics that we have as professionals to make those things happen. But that part, like, that warms my heart more than anything. When I hear that and I talk to that listing agent and they're like, my client is a veteran and man, they're going to be pretty excited to have a veteran off. So as long as it's competitive, you guys got a good shot. And it's like, yes.
And that comes with a picture and a letter.
Right.
We did that for our first home. We sent the picture with the wife and I and the two kids we had at the time and told them about what was going on, what our dreams were and aspirations, and home ownership is a dream, and we're this and we're that. And that got us the home.
Totally.
So it works to it, so it's doable out there for the veterans to get a house, and they just have to stay the course. And a big part, we talked about it too, is the financial.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Well, and I got to thank you, man. I know you got a lot on your plate with everything you're doing, and I really appreciate having you here in the studio, which is exciting, and just having you share your story, man. It's great to get to know what you're doing, learn all the stuff that you've done and accomplished in your life, and excited to follow your story and keep it going, man. Thank you.
We'll be in touch, and thanks for having me again.
Absolutely, brother.
All
Thanks.
right.
Thanks so much for checking out this week's episode. Please subscribe, click the link below, share with your friends. And hey, if you know a military person or a veteran with a great story to share, we would love to highlight them on the podcast and get their story out to everybody. Thanks so much.